So I'm Gurpreet and I'm based in Indonesia, Jakarta. It's really nice to have all of you here today. And I hope that you have a lovely engagement in this session with all of us. And over to Jitin.
Thank you, Gurpreet. Hi, my name is Jitain. Well, this might be a little bit of misrepresentation because this guy doesn't look like the one in the picture. This is my new summer haircut. Currently, I'm based out of Bangalore in India. I'm MYP coordinator for an international school here. I love everything about MYP. And as we go into this session, you will see this is a program that I've been living up for. We are going to be talking about interdisciplinary teaching and learning, and we don't even realize everything that we do in our life is interdisciplinary, right? From accessing this webinar to looking at how we access whether you're buying vegetables or whether you are accessing news. You think in language, you are translating things from a language that you are not really competent with or comfortable with to your own mother tongue, and you are using math, vocabulary, you're looking at the design features. So it's something that we actually live in, as our brains processes every type of information. We are going to be looking at some scenarios from various schools. These are obviously fictitious schools, and we're going to look at what are some of the challenges. This is going to be a very conversational sessions. We're going to be having a chat, me and Gurpreet, about what's going on. So Gurpreet, this is a school that's based out in La La Land, all right? And La La Land is located in La La Land, and they've been doing MYP for quite some time, and they're quite competent. And the MYP coordinator has decided, you know what, I'm going to do an IDU with all 8 subject groups, right? This is very, very interesting. And with the same school, last year, the MYP coordinator kind of decided, you know what, it's really big problem to bring people together across grade level. So I'm going to sit in my office and draw, lots, and then going to decide which 2 subjects should be interdisciplinary. So what do you think are some of the problems? Like, do you think these 2 scenarios with La La Land International should work? Is it IB, or is it, something that will not really work?
Jitin, thank you so much for bringing up this scenario because this is something that many times when we begin on the journey in the MYP, this is how people begin with. And the participants, yes, you're right, many of you are writing there in the chat. Yes, it's very difficult for such a scenario to really bring out the authentic nature of what interdisciplinary learning is. It's like as if you have tied something around your eyes and you're shooting in the dark. So the entire essence of interdisciplinary learning would be lost in such a situation if you're going to be drawing lots and saying these are the 2 things that will come together. And Jidin, my question to you is that why do you think so a coordinator would go to such an extreme situation of drawing lots? What would have prompted the coordinator to do that?
Maybe the coordinator is lazy like me. No, that's definitely not me. It could be a lot of things. Sometimes lack of collaboration. Sometimes personalities coming together, right? Like you can just blame everything and say that, oh, you know what? It's not me. It's the Lord's that made you come together. But as the participants are saying in the chat, that it has to be purposeful. The units need to come together for a reason. It has to bring the essence of these 2 subjects come together because it's going to be more meaningful for our students rather than adding too many subjects or making it token because the IB expects you to do or because we need to do it as a school. So it's important that we are creating units that are meaningful, they're grounded in discipline, and they are conceptual. They're quite important that we are thinking it from broad parameters of concepts. One of the most interesting thing that the IB recommends as a requirement, Gurpreet, is that they need to be formal. So that means there has to be a system in place in terms of how you're actually planning and collaborating, and it needs to use the interdisciplinary unit planning process, right? And the guide very clearly states that not all topics are equally suited for a quality interdisciplinary inquiry, Gurpreet. So do you think that everything can be interdisciplinary, probably?
Um, a great point here. It is not necessary that everything would be interdisciplinary because you're talking about the synergy of the two subject disciplines or the three subjects that are coming together in this unit. They have to bring something to the table. So, one of the things I read one of the participants write, and I think so that's true, is because maybe a school would go down the path of drawing these kind of lots if there's not enough collaborative meeting time, and that is one of the cornerstones on which the MYP is built, that you should have systematic collaborative meeting time where you can draw out authentic connections with real life situations. So rather than saying what the MYP is talking about in terms of it is mandatory to do an interdisciplinary unit, I think, Sujitain, it's more important to understand and flow with why do you think so interdisciplinary understanding is so important in today's world, and why is it that MYP is insisting on it. So having that focus and that alignment in philosophy with the reasons why interdisciplinary should be a part of the MYP is so important,
Very
right?
thinking about the why and looking at it from the culture of this, of why do we want to do it and what do we believe about it. Jerry, what do you think? What are your thought process?
Yeah, so I am looking at these amazing chat comments that are coming through from our so eager participants today, and they are really looking at this idea of the authenticity and being sure that what we're looking for when we're thinking interdisciplinary, that where are those combinations which actually make the most sense and bringing together things. And so I would pose this perhaps as a question to the two of you. It was a comment in the chat, but in
That's
terms
brilliant, Jerry, because that's my next scenario. What actually makes it authentic?
well, and also I think that idea, and I'll pose this part to you as well. Do you think that there is a number? Like, is it like how many is either enough or too many, perhaps? So I'll pass that over to you both.
That's good. Let's look at another school scenario. This is a Resistance International School. Okay, and this is a school that's very rebellious, and all the teachers, Gurpreet, have decided that you know what, we can't do IDUs. This is too much, right? It's too much work. You make us do so much. We are really tired, so we are not going to do that. And while the teachers are looking at this, the head of middle school, have found out, they conducted a survey that there is a lot of increased level of stress in the middle school students. There's a lot of focus on you have to do so much. How do you think bringing in interdisciplinarity, Gurpreet, will change the culture of the school? Is it beneficial? How would you convince these teachers?
Absolutely. One of the participants actually talked about how it is important that adolescent kids are exposed to something like this. So, when you look at a school which is having this kind of resistance, and resistance, the resistance is not just to the philosophy of the MYP, but it is also about bringing quality education to the students, right? So I think so that the teachers need to have a reflection, the school needs to have a reflection about the philosophy that it has at the heart of providing education to the youngsters, because that is not being just, it is not preparing them to what the life that they're going to be seeing outside school is going to be all about. It's not going to be compartmentalized into this is right now mathematics and this is sciences. So if you're looking at how the thinking that's going to be developed in these students, the critical aspects, to be able to look at things from a broader perspective, um, if the school is resisting all that, then it's not actually providing good quality education.
Absolutely. Very well said, Gurpreet. Do you think our students would be able to see that synergy if they see both of us talking? Like, I teach individuals in societies and visual arts, and you teach math, and we are together talking about learning, and they can see a visible example of two of their teachers having conversation about something that affects them. It also, as the guide says, develops higher order cognitive processing. For all the teachers, one of the participant Gurpreet wrote something pretty well. Like, I mean, in terms of we can divide and work together, right? Division of labor. We don't have to struggle. It's very important that the culture of the school needs to change. Collaboration sometimes could be very, very tricky when you're working with a lot of personalities. Some collaborative protocols always works if you're trying to set up systems. Like one collaborative platform, protocol that I have seen used wonderfully is called as Chalk Talk, where people don't talk, they write, so that your emotions and the tone of your voice and everything that will trigger people is kept away. Another thing that wonderfully work is uh, people are not allowed to use the personal pronouns in a collaborative meeting. You're talking about the idea, and it's not about what I feel about this idea, it's about the idea itself. So these are some of the ways in which collaboration can shape the way teachers work together, and that burden of the overworked teachers of Resistance International School can actually be reduced. Gurpreet, don't you think so?
Absolutely, and we also need to understand that one of the key aspects that the program standards and practices talks about is that the students have a voice and choice in what they want to learn, and they could be part of the inquiry as well. They could be asked about what is it that you would like to learn, and that way it brings down the pressure on the teachers to be able to decide what is it that they're going to be deciding as their IDU. At the same time, it's giving a choice to the students and saying, are we teaching a curriculum that interests you? So maybe having a break there too would actually get the students engaged in their learning. And I'm sure, I'm like, as many teachers as you and I would have met, every time when you talk to a teacher and say, what is it that excites you about teaching, it's always, they come back to the student. So somewhere down the line, our passion and the reason why we are in this profession is that we like to work so that the children enjoy what we are having in happening in the classrooms. So maybe one of the things that the Resistance International School could look at is asking the kids what is exciting for them and working along those lines. So it works both the ways. If kids are having voice and choice, and the teachers don't feel too pressured to say,
That's
this is
pretty.
what we're presenting.
The new standards and practice, a whole case study done, in terms of the coordinated resource material, talks about schools of how they can bring an impact in the culture and change the whole way people approach social emotional learning by bringing interdisciplinarity in the nature. Three Musketeers put it really well: all for one and one for all. Right? We all can do it together, and I think that sort of eases out burden. Um, for beginning, it's going to be difficult. Like schools that are just joining in the MYP journey, it is challenging. It is challenging to come together. It's also a mindset that you need to develop. Like if you have worked in a system where you work individually, you plan your own lessons, sitting down with someone could sometimes be threatening. So it's going to be a process to reach there. So don't think it's going to happen tomorrow night that we are going to just sit and create these wonderful interdisciplinary unit. It's a very human process because you're dealing with another person. So it's absolutely okay to have those disagreements. But remember, the disagreement is not about you and that other person. It's about the unit. It's about the idea, right? Jerry, I think you have questions from some of our participants.
I do. I have some wonderful questions that are coming up in the Q&A, and I just wanted to just because of what you're just talking about, that idea, particularly if we're starting out with this idea of interdisciplinary unit creation, and if it's new to us, that idea, you sound like you're speaking to the idea of collaborate with one other person as a way in potentially, rather than thinking about an interdisciplinary with multiple learning areas. Would that be an accurate description of your advice?
I would say I would give it an analogy. I'm not a runner, but I think I will definitely like before you have to start doing a marathon, you need to do 100 meters first, right? Before you even do 100 meters, you need to start walking. So before schools reach like the first scenario we talked about, where they are forcibly connecting 8 subjects because it might look better, it might look really great to prove someone that we are doing a great interdisciplinary unit because 8 subject groups come together. it is important that we start small, we change the culture and then gradually implement it. And if sometimes you might get units that will have four subject groups work together, so be it. But the ideal number would be one other subject group. Gurpreet, what do you think? And then if you feel that two or three subject groups can be added later on, that would be the most interesting thing. But start slow, start small, and then make it more systematic in your culture than just doing things ad hoc. Gurpreet.
Absolutely. That's such a nice analogy that you kind of shared with everybody. So it's the small steps that matter. So even before you think about spreading the net wide and getting more subjects in to come and collaborate, if you begin with one such subject group where you could sit down with the person without having those kind of ego clashes, because that's important. That relationship that needs to build with people to be able to interact, start with one subject at least, and then move on further. Another thing that can happen is, Jiten, one of the things that teachers share very often or is easily available in schools are the subject group overviews. And I believe one of the panelists is also talking about it. So when you look at the subject group overviews, if they are available, your starting point could be common content that you could be looking at, and those are easy steps to take because that's where you can see the value that a student would get if teachers who are teaching different subjects would be able to bring to light the same content but from different perspectives. So at least one subject is what we are going to be looking at.
Yeah.
But beyond that, if you're going to be extending the net, look at the value that they're bringing onto the table. Do not just look at links that are happening, because that would not lead to good, substantial, synergistic learning.
Okay. That's great. Some questions. I can see Varsha, one of the panelists, mentioned about SGO review, and people have questions. What are SGOs? SGOs are subject group overviews. The MYP community loves acronyms. In fact, the whole IB community loves acronyms. SGO is basically an overview of the curriculum, which includes what are the key concepts you're covering, your content, the approaches to learning skills. It basically gives you a bird's eye view of the curriculum. Uh, isn't it brilliant, Gurpreet, that as an organization, the IB has thought about that it needs to be a part of the school system, and that's the reason horizontal meetings are very, very important, so that people can actually see what's going on into each other's curriculum. And once you don't have those collaborative conversations, you don't really know what's going on. What are some of the links that you can establish and you can foster? Uh, your point, in fact, brought me to the last scenario. This is fictitious international school, Gurpreet. And, like we were talking about authenticity, right? And this is a very interesting thing, and the teachers were very proud of it. So this is fictitious international school. They are a new MYP school. They are developing, and they have looked at the history teacher is doing Egyptian history, culture, and the English teacher said that, okay, why don't I do Egyptian myths? And then we're going to make an IDU out of it. Uh, Whereas the 10th grade math teacher, is struggling because they're expected to teach dance, right? And the dance teacher and the math teacher have come together, and they just thought that they're going to deliver an interdisciplinary unit, and the math teacher is now teaching dance because they're doing an interdisciplinary unit. Gurpreet, has that ever happened to you as a math teacher where you have taught dance?
To be very honest, sometimes when the first steps are there, they're often missteps. So yes, I have had those kind of blunders too. And it's all about a journey. It's all about actually developing your understanding. At the end of it, when you look back at it, you will actually say, do I really need to teach this as a math teacher? Did I bring anything to the table here? So if I was looking at this and said, oh, as a math teacher, if I'm teaching dance and I'm making a connection, I might just be able to teach them that there are patterns to the dance steps. That's it. And I don't think so that I need to be a math teacher to bring that to the table. So again, Jitin, the fictitious international school that you're talking about, they might have a good idea to start with, but they need to rethink whether subjects that they have added on to the unit that they are designing is it really worth it? Is this really helping students develop an understanding from the different subject group point of view, or you are just adding on because you want to get the math teacher to do some work? So that's my call on it. I don't know what you think about that, but do you really think so that every subject that you can kind of draw out has to be a part of the idea?
I think one of the nugget that I got from one of my IB colleague was that a good D is bad. A bad D is better than a good ID. Like, so in terms of, if you're doing something that's disciplinary and it's done with depth, it's way better than a bad interdisciplinary unit. So if we are not, like, for example, one of the participants said very rightly, Lodes Sagardo, I think, that Egyptian unit is a very, very loose unit because the students are not able to see connections. And we are seeing connections in a much more deeper way rather than just looking at topical. And we are just going to get into that. Jerry, I can see there are 12 questions. Do you want to take some so that we can, finish these questions at the right time and then move forward?
I would love to be able to just dig into a couple of them. So some of the things, I think that some of them we definitely will leave for later, because I know with the flow that you've already prepared that some will make way more sense later on in the session. But this whole piece around, I suppose, the collaboration, I think, is a really important thing that people are grappling with in terms of, does it really mean sitting down with people from these other subjects? Like, and that's a really literal question, I suppose. And just in terms of those pieces of collaboration, and certainly that clarifying on, when we're thinking about bringing in other disciplines, how many, all of those questions are still really pertinent to the group.
I think the answer to how many, I would say minimum 2, because that's how you bring subjects together. And as the school's culture reinforces collaboration, as you start developing your understanding of interdisciplinary teaching and learning, I think then you should start celebrating and adding more subjects. But I would start slow and start gentle. It's also making change management, because now you're trying to change the way people actually think and approach teaching and learning, and also trying to make them unlearn certain number of things. It's also important to look at where are we on our MYP journey, because there are so many things that you need to do together. You don't want to overwhelm A, the student, B, the teacher. You want to make it more approachable for everyone involved in this process. Collaboration doesn't need to be, you need to sit down with the teacher, because I think time is one of the most precious things, isn't it, Gurpreet? You collaborate sometimes on a lot of informal basis. Like, me and Gurpreet, we collaborated with this session on WhatsApp, like most of the time sending voice notes to each other. So in terms of, you can actually work on a Google Doc, or Toddle as a platform gives you real life collaboration, where you can work. You don't need to be in the same country, you don't need to be in the same place, and you can still create a wonderful collaboration. So collaboration is not people coming together in a room in form of a meeting, but it's more to do with how do you bounce off each other's ideas. So a lot of time we feel that it has to be having big charts, and then you're writing things, and then you're having these hour-long discussion. But it's if it's not really giving you any output, if there is no meaning, that doesn't really serve anyone. Gurpreet, do you think that's absolutely true for some of our meetings that we run? Where we discuss, but there's nothing that comes out of those meetings.
Absolutely, and one of the questions that we have a panelist like asking about is that how long should be the planning session that you're having for really thinking out an IDU. So a very simple answer to that is that there is no time that the IB sets as such for it, and therefore schools look for creative ways for setting out this time. And you're right in saying, this planning is not just like sitting formally and planning. Many of the IDUs actually happen over a cup of coffee. And as Jiten was saying, we planned for an IDU actually by chance, because I was sharing with Jiten an idea that I was exploring. And we kind of got talking about it. So it triggered in our minds that how, if the two subjects would come together, we would be able to bring more wealth into the classroom for students. So IDU planning formally, yes, you can set up systems for it, Jiten, but I think so many times it's also about putting yourself out there and talking to your colleagues and saying, I'm doing this unit. I think so. There are some great connections that are there. So many times schools actually, you're right, set up things like you have on Toddle, or set up a Google Doc and say, would you like to share certain ideas where you think there are openings for other subjects? Just conversation starters are much more important than putting everybody inside a room and say, hey, talk. So that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So you could do something like speed dating with another
I
teacher
was about to say
for
that.
IDU.
That's one of the most. And if guess what, guys, if you have single teachers, that might work more better. No, but it works with everyone because the purpose is not finding a life partner there, but is to find ideas. And it's like every school has their own set of meetings. There's a participant who has asked these questions. How do you have these meetings? Every school creates their own culture. Like you might have national and state requirements of these meetings as well. But remember, it's not the meeting, it's what happens in the meeting. Sometimes you might only have 30 minutes. And if you strategically plan those 30 minutes, like for example, speed dating, or if you can create a community where you can put things around the wall and people can then shop without knowing names, because sometimes you don't want to work with a colleague because you don't like their personality, you don't connect with them, but you love what they're teaching. So you can do a lot of different ways in which you can start finding these connections. But one of the connections that is very, very important is that do you actually value your own discipline? You can't be a math teacher who just randomly starts getting into dance, because then who's going to teach math? Who is going to be dealing with the content, because math is a structure of knowledge subject, isn't it, Gurpreet? Like who is going to teach Pythagoras theorem and geometry and algebra and calculus? Because that's important. That's what the community understands from math. So that's very, very important. So I think that's the most important key, that your subjects remain the subjects. And then the most important is, what are they bringing to the interdisciplinary table, right? How is math connected to dance is more important than just these two subjects coming together. Gurpreet, what do you think?
Definitely, like, Jiten, when you start developing a conceptual understanding for the subject, and for mathematics, I would say that because I moved over to teaching art after some time of teaching math and science. So I can teach patterns, and I can teach patterns beautifully by taking provocations from design, from art, from dance, right, from music. So, as a mathematics teacher, to bring in the interest for the students, to start getting them to understand at a conceptual level that what patterns are and how do you extend patterns, I can take stuff from different subjects. But if I'm going to be saying that I'm going to be developing I'm going to be developing a deeper understanding of mathematics because I have done a dance with the students, there might be limitations that could happen there. So it really depends on the teacher, how the teacher would extend this understanding and take it forward. So I wouldn't negate it completely, but I would say you need to actually go with a lot of caution when you make these kind of connections, to say that what you are going to be doing with them. If you have solid content which is going to help you unpack the concept, then yes, you could have some really powerful units when you look at arts, dance, or music and bring it to your mathematics class together as an IDU. But important thing, as Jitain is kind of stressing, is do not just make vague connections. See how you can unpack the concept. Look at what the conceptual understanding is going to be that the kids are going to develop. And if you're clear about that as a teacher, that's a great way to actually start and get the provocation going in the classroom.
That's brilliant. So, Gurpreet, if I say that I'm a dance teacher and I use 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 in my dance, do you think that's interdisciplinary unit?
I wouldn't say that just 1, 2, 3, 4 cha 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 is what you're going
Because
to do
I'm
with me.
using numbers, right? Like,
Right. If you just say that you're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4 cha cha cha, and you say that that is going to be a pattern for you,
yeah,
I would actually take it one step further and I would ask you that why do you call it a pattern? Now,
brilliant.
understand that the questioning that I'm going to be taking, the inquiry that I'm going to be building, is going to develop an understanding that patterns require a repetition of certain individual elements. So I have built a conceptual understanding in your mind, which will help you apply this idea of patterns, not to just 1, 2, cha cha cha, but also to music patterns, also to patterns that you see in the rhyme and meter of poems, right? That is the idea of moving out from a content kind of a thing, saying one, two, cha, cha, cha,
Yeah.
and moving to a
Without
conceptual
conceptual
understanding.
understanding. That's really good. Some interesting other ways that you can enter into IDUs as well is real world community based global problems. Like, for example, right now the world is trying to solve the coronavirus pandemic through an interdisciplinary approach, right? Through looking at how could we all solve it. There's economic, social, medical reasons. Or you can begin with some of the interpersonal problems. Remember, we are a learner-centered program. Like, what do these teens go through? Angst and rebellion, and like things that the students actually are really, really passionate about. If you start with that, you have 100% engagement from the students. So, in terms, we have to sum up our conversation that we had in the last 30 minutes. Is that when you're trying to build a interdisciplinary unit, we need to follow the interdisciplinary unit planner. That's the first thing. We are trying to create a purposeful unit where both teachers find value in that connection, both teachers find value in that collaboration, both teachers find value in that conversation, and it's going to help the student to understand how these subjects bring common understanding for concepts. You're going to create a statement of inquiry. We are not going to get into statement of inquiry. We had some amazing sessions in the morning today of how to formulate statement of inquiry. But the key concept and the related concepts and the global context will play a huge role in bringing the understanding together. But as you can see in this diagram, disciplines remain as disciplines. You value what you're trying to teach, and then you go deeper as far as related concepts concerned to build those conceptual understanding, to bring the understanding they're trying to bring together as both subjects together. There was one of the questions in the chat, Gurpreet, about the criteria that are used to assess in interdisciplinary. It's very interesting that nobody wants to ask about objectives. People directly want to jump on criteria because that's how we have been conditioned as educators or as students as well. What is the assessment going to be? Tell me how I'm going to be successful. How can I show and demonstrate that I am be successful in this? So there are three objectives: evaluating, then there is reflecting and communicating. Just for the benefit of everyone, the interdisciplinary guide just went through a recent change. From 4 criteria, now they moved to 3. The evaluating kind of looks at disciplinary grounding and how disciplines are contributing, how constantly the students are reflecting on the synergy of these two subjects, and how they're communicating their understanding. So that's the objective, and then they are assessed in terms of becoming criteria. Jerry, do we have questions at this point?
We have, and so there are quite a lot of questions around assessment that are in the Q&A, and I know that there is an intention for in the session to go there later, so I'll leave those ones there for now. But I think that idea that you're just speaking about, Raji has this question around keeping certain elements perhaps subject specific within an IDU. So in terms of that balance between potentially where are those moments of intersection of meaningful integration within an interdisciplinary unit while you may be doing other things potentially in your subject specific. So I wondered if you wanted to respond to that one now though.
I think so that we should, because I can also see that a lot of our, the questions are revolving around how is it that you could be looking at, individual subjects, the skills and knowledge from that being used for the authentic assessment that should happen in the IDUs. So a very quick response for that is that when you're doing an interdisciplinary unit, with the new guide, you can actually see that the subjects could actually go ahead teaching their own subject objectives, building the skills that are needed in each of their lessons. You don't have to do parallel teaching as such if it's not required. So it could be that I'm doing my content teaching, I'm developing the understanding of the unit from my subject perspective, and the other teacher is continuing with their own subject perspective. And once that kind of development of skills and knowledge is done, the teachers can then come together and say, now you look at this real life issue or this real life problem and see what can be done with it as a solution. And through that, you would find that the students would have the knowledge and the skills from both the subjects to look at that issue that you have presented and then come up with a solution. So In terms of being able to carry out your own subject specific objectives, yes, you can do that. You come together at one particular point when you feel that the students have developed the skills that are needed to be able to move further in their learning. Jitain, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I think that's very greatly put, Gurpreet. But to to go forward, it's also important to realize that we don't have to teach these units together, right?
Sure.
Recently, in the new guide, on page number 33. I was just looking at that.
Yes.
I'll put that on the chat. You will see an example of how there is non-concurrent teaching going on.
Yes.
And that's a very interesting way, Gurpreet, to teach transfer to the student, because sometimes that's a very difficult skill to teach. How do you teach students to transfer learning from one subject group to another? So I think non-concurrent teaching solves a lot of those problems where we are forcing units to come together because we want to do an interdisciplinary unit. So, like for example, if the language teacher wants to do the chunk of writing strategies in the beginning of the year, and then the science teacher can derive on all those kind of things later on, I think that can work pretty well. So you don't have to do concurrent teaching. So uh, with what you suggested, teachers can then look at whether they want to do concurrent teaching and have those collaborative conversation while the unit is going on, or then constantly rely on each other's work throughout the year. But one of the most important thing is that they need to know, right? That's the most important thing.
Yes. And as teachers, sometimes, when we are looking at the synergy, we need to be very clear that what that synergy means for us, because our definition of synergy should not be that there's going to be a radical development of understanding that all of a sudden students will have. It's a step by step process that's happening here. So, like, as an examiner for IDU last year, when I was correcting the interdisciplinary units for May 2020, for May 2019, basically. At that point of time, what had happened was that looking at the kind of answers that the students were writing, you could see that they're using skills from both the subjects. But when it came to reflections that they were creating, at that point of time, you would see that the kids, some of them were moving into an understanding, saying that how having an idea or the skills that they had developed in their language and literature class helped them create what they were writing in their assessment. But it was not necessary that students had made a radical leap forward, but they were small changes that you could see, Jitin. And that's important for us to understand that when you're doing an IDU, you don't need to teach together. You don't need to have a collapsible timetable that certain schools find very difficult to implement, because we are looking at progression of skills. And as in any normal situation, I could develop one set of skills before, followed by another set of skills, and then come to a point where I bring them together in my learning. So that is where transfer, I think so, takes precedence over synergy. And I like that word that you used, because it's the transfer that will lead to a deeper analysis as the students move forward.
Let's get into this lesson that we planned, Gurpreet. I'm very
Yes.
excited. Uh, in terms of bringing arts and maths together, and we're looking at perspective.
I think so. You'll have to move a few slides back, Jitin.
Okay, I am sorry. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Like this went too ahead.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, that. I'm sorry. I don't know how did that go. Sorry, guys. Technology. Yeah.
I think what we're just preparing for everyone is lots of people in the chat and the Q&A, they're looking for examples of what this might look like. And I know that some people are looking for specific combinations. And what we're going to be working through and walking through together is a particular example of those commonalities that we can bring together through those conceptual lenses of what that meaningful connection may be. For those of you who are looking for those specific examples that may be outside of the example that we're about to share today, I hope it does provide you with an insight or a way of connecting to, okay, what are those key ideas that are being presented, and how might I find those authentic connections with whichever discipline you may be inspired to find connections with. I definitely know that sometimes it's about the personality of the person, that you've got that person in the other discipline who you work really well with, and I know that the two of you are certainly an example of that. That it's through your passion of the learners and the learning that you perhaps have come together to be able to create this inspiring example for us. So
yeah,
I think we're on the right slide now, is that right?
yes, you're on the right side. So Gurpreet, you're entering through concepts.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think, so Jiten, like what we were just discussing when we were doing that 1, 2, cha-cha-cha, we'll start from there, right?
Yeah.
Tell me something that how far do you remember that when we were discussing about this art and mathematics unit, um, our starting conversation about it started with a prompt that I had shared with you. Do you remember that?
Yes, how are mathematicians and artists similar, right? And I was
Absolutely.
like, oh, how is that possible? Like, I mean, yes, I know, Gurpreet, we use rulers sometimes in the class, but that does not make us mathematician. But that was a very thought-provoking question because it made me think about that. How is it something that's so concrete like math be considered so equal to something as abstract as art? And that was how we got into this conversation.
Absolutely. What I had done at that point of time was I had actually picked up a kind of a provocative question that I had in my mathematics unit, and I had put that forward to you. So, if you're going to be looking at entry points from concept, um, we are going to be looking at the concepts themselves, and we are going to be moving from there and saying how is it that we can start an IDU from a key concept. So, just as a point of reflection, and so that we can hear our participants also put forward their thoughts, I open now the chat and the discussions about it. From a conceptual point of view, what is it that you think so we can unpack about the concept perspective from the art subject group point of view and from the mathematics subject group point of view? So please post here in the chat. Jerry, over to you so that we can hear this.
So Leo has been, like, he heard you ask a question and responded immediately. So while we give other people a moment to collect their thoughts, I'll just share what Leo shared straight off. He suggested that both art and math are abstract, but examples of the two are found in real life. So that was his very quick thinking, wonderful comment. So thank you for jumping in there. So we then have elements of the trigonometry. So elements from when we think about the spatial relation of the two modes of art from Ramesh has shared. Really the symmetry. So the aspects of symmetry is something that's coming up in the chat. Some really other great points. So that's the concept or the area of math thinking about the spatial relations is definitely a key idea that's popping up in the chat.
Absolutely. Somebody's talking about, Michael, you're talking about the golden proportion, the golden ratio, understanding angles. Shanta, you were talking about how you could be looking at the research that is there, which says that mathematicians and artists operate from the same creative space. Absolutely. See, when we start looking at the concept of perspective, and Jite and I will talk from the point of view on mathematics, and you can actually take up for the arts here. So when we talk about the concept of perspective from mathematics, it's something that we need to understand that it's not just about perspective drawing, but perspective here would also be about how we as mathematicians would look at decoding problems. What is my perspective about certain things that are around me? How do I observe patterns and how do I decode problems? Would be my perspective to the world around me.
Yep.
Jitin.
In visual art, we pretty much look at perspective. What do you think about this piece of art, or the very question itself? Is this art? Is, I think, bringing in perspective, and that's what artists talk all about, right? Like that's where all school of thoughts came across. Yeah.
Right. The next thing that I actually posed as a question when I was going through this entire thing was, and Shanta, it was actually from the space that you have talked about, that mathematicians and artists, they work from the same creative space. In fact, humans work from a common creative space. We don't have boundaries inside our brain which says, now I'm switching to my math thinking and now I'm switching to my art thinking. We actually think in a very synergistic manner. So I looked at a perspective and I said that what happens when we have different perspectives. And out pop the words that as human beings, we create a number of things around us. So we are going to now look at the concept of creativity from the point of view of arts and mathematics. So, Jiten, when you look at creativity as an art teacher, what do you see?
I mean, it's anything which kind of speaks to you, it brings and invokes emotion, or it excites you, which basically awakens, like the opposite of aesthetic is anesthetic. So something that kills your emotion is not creative, and something that really makes you engage into this is creative. Yeah.
Absolutely. So when we look at creativity as mathematicians, there's an abundant amount of research that has happened whether mathematicians can be creative. And one of the best examples in mathematicians being creative is the kind of solutions that people create to problems. And sometimes you will find mathematics, you'll find a mathematics teacher coming to you and saying, I don't believe it, that was such a beautiful solution to a problem, or that was such an elegant equation. And all of a sudden you have this puzzled question mark on the faces of other people, that how could a solution be elegant? But creativity in mathematics means different things. And right now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to take some time to look at the standards that we have for mathematics. Take a minute to reflect. Jiten, could I ask you to, yes, stop here. I've taken the Common Core subject standards. Have a minute and just kind of a reflection for you. Look at what the subject standards are talking about in terms of creativity and perspectives.
And so, Gurpreet, we're just popping these ones into the chat instead of going to the Padlet. Is that what you'd prefer? We're just conscious of time with our wonderful.
Yeah, please go ahead, share the Padlet link with the participants.
Perfect.
Because it's going to be now moving to.
In just a moment, friends, it's just appeared into your chat feed is a link to a Padlet wall. This will actually be a growing Padlet wall over the course of the last remaining moments that we have together, but also after the session, there are some things that we've got up our sleeve that we'd love to share with you post-session. So please grab that link and head on over to the Padlet wall, and we will be jumping in there, and you'll see that the first column has a question for you. So what is creativity in mathematics? So we can see that there are some friends jumping in there now in terms of different ways of solving a problem. And so feel free that you can jump in there also to share your thoughts. We would love this to be a living representation of thinking, perhaps not just right now in the session, but also after the session. But I think it's really important, Gurpreet, that what we're setting the conditions for with what you've just asked people to do is how we continue the learning, not just within a wonderful hour, which is a fleeting moment of learning opportunity, but certainly a way of us continuing and staying connected as a group. So we're getting lots of wonderful responses, and there's some wonderful people who are even jumping ahead to column 2 and thinking about some of those ideas that are taking it beyond the question you asked them to respond to straight away. Gurpreet.
That's really nice, because I'm actually reading those responses, and that's really what I wanted to actually take up with the participants, because you see, this is where you would understand. If you look at your responses right now that are popping in there, you've actually started looking at the concepts and you're unpacking the concepts. So what happens when we are looking at conceptual based interdisciplinary units is that teachers start looking at what the concept means from their subject point of view. And when we do this, it helps students also make the same kind of connection. I could be teaching any topic, I could be teaching any content that is valid at a particular time for me. And if I take their thinking to this conceptual level, that is where you're having your interdisciplinary, the synergy coming into your classroom. Jiten, what are your thoughts about the responses for arts? I'm really excited to see this.
So I'm the only thing that I'm very, very excited to share, Gurpreet, that in this entire conversation, we did not even once talk about the content that we are collaborating on, right? So if people can see that what we are doing right now is conceptual thinking,
Yep.
we are thinking beyond content and we are trying to bring things together, and that's what an actual interdisciplinary unit should be able to do, should be able to bring people to this level where they are having these conversations about how are math and science, or how is math and art really connected at an interdisciplinary conceptual level, and not just simply 1 2 3 cha cha cha. That's going to be my mantra, Gurpreet, now. So from 1 2 3 cha 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 to pattern, and I think that's some of the most exciting thing. This is my aha moment, right? So do you think we should give an assessment to the participants now, Gurpreet?
Absolutely. And we're just going to be actually winding this up to some extent so that we can answer a few more questions. But you see, with this small exercise that we have just done, you would be able to see that the connection that you have made with the two subjects coming together, and it's not limited to just these two subjects, if you see. But as an example, if you see that you were all looking at unpacking a concept itself, this is an important step for making an interdisciplinary unit. From our side, I would be posting some more resources here so that this wall remains a live wall. So by tomorrow, if you pop in again to this Padlet, you should be able to see a whole set of resources and some kind of prompts that will actually show you. To give you an idea, that Jitain and I were actually looking at not at any other aspect, but we were talking about the Pythagoras theorem and how there are a number of proofs that Pythagoras theorem have. And that is what triggered the conversation further. And I said, what is creativity for a mathematician, and how do you have different perspectives to solving the same theorem in more than 300 ways? So that was the mathematics that I wanted to teach to my students and say, is it just going to be one way of solving or proving the Pythagoras theorem, or are there different ways? And that's where perspective and creativity came for me as a mathematics teacher, to talk about problem solving. And Jitain then talked about how perspective and creativity could be there. So there's going to be a small link for how the unit plan came together. Looking at the extension that we have given to you, it is a TEDx talk that's available, and it talks about the hidden maths that is there around the world. Jitain, your thoughts about the assessment, Gary?
Yeah, so I think it's the assessment is for our students to plan. I'm sorry, it opened the TED talk. A TED style presentation on this prompt, that how is creativity and perspective together. We want them to bring the concepts that they've unpacked in maths, the concepts that they've unpacked in art, use the artistic techniques to do a good presentation, learn how to use mathematical language, and you can see that there is so much that brings them together. It is going to be most authentic when the students are given an opportunity to. Now, you can find out anything under the sun to present your understanding. You don't have to actually just use Pythagoras theorem or Rembrandt. You can actually build your own understanding. And that is the beauty of, a great, authentic, middle years, authentic interdisciplinary unit. I think with which we have 3 minutes left now. Let's put over to Jerry. I hope we have answered some of your questions. If not, we can pop some of them on the Padlet.
Absolutely. I've been madly responding to people in the Q&A in text form, as well as knowing that certain pieces that we've addressed live. One of the key things that I wanted to, just before we close, this slide here, just in terms of, I think you have made this abundantly clear throughout the whole session about the importance of the collaboration, and really breaking down what we mean by collaboration, and how that does not necessarily mean synchronous and in a room, but asynchronous, and the possibilities are endless of what that truly looks like and feels like. For anyone who has had an opportunity to see inside the Toddle platform already, you will have seen some of those features. Miss Bar will be running a session in just a little while. If you are interested in seeing inside the Toddle platform and hadn't already, please do pop over to there. But I think there's one last question that I'd really, definitely one, I think we'd maybe have time for maybe a couple of questions, but I'd love to draw out this one question that refers to, we've focused quite heavily on the conceptual lenses of how we stay relevant in terms of interdisciplinary thinking. but someone has asked a question about the skills and how we can think about the ATLs as possible pathways of deepening and enriching interdisciplinary. I'd love to pose that to both of you to share a little bit of your thoughts on that one.
That's a fantastic question. I'm jumping in because I'm really excited about answering this question. So thank you so much, whosoever asked this, because in this unit, actually, I had looked at problem solving skills as the heart of the starting point. And for me, I was looking at problem solving skills as what we do in mathematics. And that is where my ATLs actually were in full drive, right? So they could be a lovely unit in an interdisciplinary sense where you are using the skills. My only caution that I felt that I have to stress on from personal experiences, if you're just going to be looking at skills and saying that this is going to give you any kind of a disciplinary grounding, you need to have content that you're building that skills through. So invariably, what is going to happen is, although it's a skill heavy unit that you might develop, you might have to also look at content that is building up that skill. And therefore, there's an interplay of your subject group objectives with the ATL skills that are embedded in that objective to create this unit. But just to have an IDU which is only skill based, I don't know how that would be possible. Jiten.
Yeah, I think I resonate exactly. Objectives have everything embedded. Remember, when you're teaching students to analyze or evaluate, which is a part of your either subject group objectives or the interdisciplinary objective, there is so much of doing involved in it, right? So you are teaching skills to your students, even though you're not focusing on teaching skills. Some skills you will teach explicitly. By the way, there are some amazing sessions after hours which will focus on this if you want to look at this. We only had 1 hour, but you have to focus on knowing, understanding, and doing. If you can do these 3 things, you have done a great job as a teacher. And I'm sure that we all do what we do every single day as teachers. Like make sure that our students are inquiring and becoming lifelong learners.
Jerry, can I just
that there are people already dropping off of the call, just because I know some people are super keen to jump over to Malcolm Nichols' session, which is starting right now, and he is digging into this exact topic of the why and what of the ATL. So off the back of what we've just been talking about, wish everyone the very best of, for the rest of their sessions. We have 3 more amazing sessions for today, so please do stay with us. And we thank you also very much for your time. Thank you, Tatin and Gurpreet, for your amazing expertise. Your wisdom has been just inspiring. Some people are saying this is the best session that they've attended all day. So thank you so very much for your time and your energy and your clear passion about making sure that interdisciplinary learning is truly as rich as it possibly can. So thank you, everyone. We hope you enjoy the rest of the symposium.
Have a good evening, everyone, and stay safe. Bye.
Bye. Jerry, very quickly, could I have these questions onto the Padlet, because I would love to answer them there.
Yeah.
And I don't want the participants to feel that their answers are not, the answers